I remember the exact moment it happened. The second I knew I was no longer a valued team member, but an obstacle in someone else's rise. It was a rainy Tuesday morning when my boss, Andrew Colton, called me into his office. I'd worked for him for 6 years, 6 long years of building his startup from a 3-person garage operation to a national logistics powerhouse. We were partners in everything but name. I had sacrificed weekends, relationships, and even my health at times, to help make his dream real. I believed in it, believed in us. So when he gestured for me to sit down with that carefully neutral expression on his face, I already knew something was off. "Vanessa," he began, steepling his fingers like he was about to give a TED Talk. "You've done incredible work over the years, truly. But as we scale, I need leaders with a different kind of experience." That's when I noticed the envelope on his desk. My name, written in thick black ink, and below it, in smaller print, "New role Alpha, not promotion, not partnership agreement, not even VP, a new role." I opened the envelope slowly, even though my hands had already gone numb. "Executive Liaison Regional Operations." It was a fancy way of saying glorified assistant, a lateral move at best, a demotion at worst. "Andrew," I said, struggling to keep my voice steady, "you told me last quarter that I'd be up for coup." He gave a small, rehearsed chuckle. "I did, but since then, the board's had concerns. Your style, while passionate, can be intense, and we need a team that can align more. Diplomatically. Translation: I wasn't easy to manipulate. "See," I said quietly, folding the letter back up, "I still want you here, Vanessa, just not in the spotlight." He smiled then, like he expected me to thank him. I didn't. I stood up, walked out of his office, and never went back. But that was just the beginning. I spent that entire night pacing in my apartment, surrounded by boxes of documents and old pitch decks, remnants of a company I'd helped breathe life into. I wasn't just hurt, I was humiliated. Andrew had used my ideas, my strategies, my blood, sweat, and no sleep sacrifices, and then, when the company was finally stable enough to attract real funding, he pushed me aside like I was a temp who overstayed her welcome. You see, Andrew made one fatal mistake. He underestimated just how much I remembered, and how much I had helped build. I knew every vendor, every loophole in the contracts. I knew which clients were only loyal because of my personal relationships. I knew which regional managers were barely holding things together. And more importantly, I knew his biggest weakness: Titan Freight. Titan Freight had been our fiercest competitor for 3 years until we outmaneuvered them on a few key contracts. Their CEO, Dana Whitaker, was as cutthroat as they came. We'd competed hard, but always respected each other's hustle. So I made a phone call. "Vanessa," Dana sounded surprised. "To what do I owe the pleasure?" "I want to buy in," I said, my voice steady for the first time in 24 hours, "and I want to help you bury Colton Logistics." There was a beat of silence, then a low, intrigued laugh. "Now you've got my attention." Within 2 weeks, I had liquidated half of my savings, taken out a personal loan, and negotiated a 10% equity stake in Titan. It wasn't much, but it came with a real title: Senior Strategic Director. More importantly, it came with a mission, and revenge had never looked so professional. Working for Dana was like stepping into a high-speed chess match, every move calculated, every resource used strategically. Unlike Andrew, Dana didn't surround herself with yes-men. She liked sharp minds, independent thinkers, people who could get results without hand-holding. She gave me full autonomy from day one. "Find the cracks," she told me. "Break him from the inside out." And I did. First, I went after the vendor contracts I'd personally helped secure while working at Colton. Andrew had always cut corners when it came to long-term service agreements. He cared more about impressing investors than building reliable partnerships. So I reached out to our old contacts. "You remember me, right? Vanessa Hartley. I used to be your point of contact at Colton." "Of course," they all said. "We loved working with you." What happened? I didn't go into detail. I didn't need to. I simply told them that I was with Titan now, that we were expanding, that we offered better rates and better relationships. Within 3 months, 5 of Colton's top suppliers had dropped them cold. Andrew must have felt the tremors, but he probably thought it was market shifts, not me. That was his second mistake. His third. He kept hiring people who were loyal to titles, not loyalty itself. I knew his new VP of Operations, Logan Sharp, arrogant, sloppy, and deeply insecure. The kind of guy who loved his own voice more than his metrics. I'd clashed with him before when we both pitched to investors. He never forgot how I outperformed him, so I baited him at a logistics conference in Phoenix. I accidentally ran into him during a break. "Vanessa," he said, eyes narrowing like he'd seen a ghost. "I'm surprised you're here." I smiled sweetly. "I thought you only attended when Andrew needed someone to nod behind him." His ego couldn't resist. An hour later, he was ranting about how hard it was to fix the systems I'd apparently messed up. He thought he was trashing my legacy. Instead, he was giving me everything I needed: insider info about Colton's operational vulnerabilities, bottlenecks, internal chaos. All of it in exchange for a little attention and another cocktail. Thanks, Logan. Back at Titan, Dana and I pounced on the data. We launched a new campaign aimed at Colton's mid-sized clients, businesses that were too big to ignore but too small for Andrew to cater to directly. We offered better service, faster delivery, a familiar face. They came in droves. It wasn't until Quatrain that Andrew realized something was wrong. Titan's name kept popping up in lost client reports. Revenue from key accounts was dipping quietly, but consistently. He tried to reassure the board it was seasonal fluctuation, but the numbers didn't lie. And when you're in logistics, delays and contract losses aren't just numbers, they're alarms. He should have known then, but Andrew never imagined I could orchestrate something like this. Not me. Not the woman he once called his secret weapon. Until I outgrew being someone's secret. I watched from the shadows as his empire began to tremble. One of our most critical moves came when I noticed that Colton's contract with their warehouse tech provider VoltStream was up for renewal. I had personally negotiated that partnership back in the early days, and I knew that VoltStream's founder, Marco, had a soft spot for me. We'd built that partnership on trust, not just numbers. I flew to Denver and met Marco over lunch. He grinned as soon as he saw me. "You're with Titan now. You're really playing for the other team." I smiled. "Let's just say I'm finally with the team that sees my value." We talked for hours. I didn't even have to pitch hard. By the end of the week, Titan had a new tech deal in place at a lower cost than what Colton was paying, and 2 months later, VoltStream politely declined to renew with Colton, citing strategic realignment. Andrew was furious. I heard from a mutual friend that he threw a chair during the team meeting. Because that was just the appetizer. The main course, a client dinner. One of our shared former clients, Sterling Naturals, a nationwide distributor of organic foods, on the fence. They liked me, but they were loyal to Andrew's brand, so I invited their leadership to a private dinner in Chicago. No pitch deck, no slideshow, just a meal, a conversation, and a copy of a confidential report I had helped write during my final months at Colton. A report detailing exactly how Colton Logistics had been padding invoices on rush services and misclassifying freight to inflate margins. I let them read it. They left that dinner pale-faced and quiet. 2 weeks later, they signed with Titan for a 5-year exclusive partnership, and Colton's biggest quarterly account was gone overnight. The email came at 6:42 a.m. Subject line: "We need to talk." I didn't need to open it to know who it was from, but I did anyway. From Andrew Colton to Vanessa Hartley. "Vanessa, I've become aware of your involvement with Titan. I think we both know this has gone far enough. Let's meet. I'm sure we can find a way to resolve this amicably." There it was. The desperation, the shift from dismissal to negotiation. 6 months ago, he thought I was replaceable. Now, he was begging me for a sit-down, and the irony, I wasn't even done yet. I didn't respond, not yet. Instead, I forwarded the message to Dana with a single line: "He's starting to sweat." She replied in less than a minute: "Let him boil." Andrew wasn't just losing clients anymore. Word was spreading internally, too. Former colleagues, ones who'd once kept their heads down and accepted his arrogance, were now applying. At Titan, I'd personally hired 3 of his top operations managers and 2 of his best dispatchers, not because they were looking for revenge, but because they were tired of working for someone who took all the credit and none of the blame. I didn't poach them. I didn't have to. They came to me. One day I got a message on LinkedIn from Rachel, Colton's senior financial analyst. "You were right about him," she wrote. "Wish I'd seen it sooner." I met her for coffee that weekend. She brought spreadsheets, not just any spreadsheets, internal financials, ones that showed just how precarious Colton's cash flow really was. Andrew's been using investor capital to patch operational shortfalls, Rachel whispered, looking over her shoulder as if he might appear. And he's if even 2 of his major contracts default or delay, he'll default on his credit line. She paused. That's Sterling Natural's loss. That might be the one that breaks him. I leaned back in my chair. I didn't smile, not because I didn't want to, but because the satisfaction ran deeper than a smirk. Andrew hadn't just underestimated me. He'd built his empire on the bones of my loyalty, and now it was collapsing under the weight of his arrogance. The restaurant he chose was exactly what I expected, overpriced, dimly lit, dripping with fake exclusivity. Andrew always did love the illusion of power. I arrived 5 minutes late, not because I was stalling, but because I knew he'd be watching the door, anxious. Let him wait. Let him feel just a hint of the disregard I once felt sitting outside his office, wondering why I wasn't good enough for a partnership. He stood up as I approached the table. Gray suit, loosened tie, bags under his eyes. He looked older, smaller. Vanessa, he said, trying to smile. Thanks for coming. I was curious, I said, sliding into the booth across from him. It's not every day the man who demoted me calls for peace talks. He flinched, just barely. But I saw it. I didn't mean to offend you back. Then, he said, hands folded like a repentant monk. You were essential. You still are. Is that so? I sipped my water, because I seemed to recall being told I was too intense, not diplomatic enough. He winced again. It was a mistake. You're right. It was. He leaned forward. Look, this doesn't have to get uglier. I know you've been working with Titan. I know you've made moves, but this hurts both of us, doesn't it? I raised an eyebrow. I'm doing quite well, actually. You're bleeding the company dry. I'm leveling the playing field, I corrected. You've fired your architect and tried to build a skyscraper with yes men. Don't be surprised when it collapses. Andrew's smile finally cracked. A flash of frustration flickered in his eyes. You're angry. I get it. Angry. I leaned in, lowering my voice just slightly. No, Andrew. Angry is what I was the day you handed me that envelope. What I am now is focused. He didn't respond, so I continued. Do you want to know the real reason you're losing everything? It's not because I joined Titan. It's because you believed your success was yours alone, that I was just a footnote in your narrative. I paused, letting the silence stretch. I wasn't a footnote. I was the foundation. Andrew looked down at the table. His hands were shaking now. I want to propose a merger, he said finally. Colton and Titan, you and me, back on the same team. We're stronger together. I actually laughed. Quietly, but genuinely. Andrew, that offer might have meant something 2 years ago. Now it's desperation in a tailored suit. He swallowed. You'd really burn this all down. No, I said, standing slowly. You already did that. I just made sure the right people watched it happen. I turned to leave, but paused beside his chair. You wanted a queen off the board. Andrew, congratulations. You got one. Then I walked out and left him sitting there, staring into the ruins of the kingdom he thought was only his. 2 weeks after that dinner, the final blow landed. Colton Logistics officially lost their largest government contract, one that I had personally secured during my time there. It wasn't just a client loss, it was a message. A signal to every other account watching from the sidelines. Within 48 hours, their stock price dropped 11%. By Monday, it was 19%. And on Wednesday, Andrew announced his temporary leave from the company. Translation: he'd been pushed out. I watched the press conference from my office at Titan HQ, sipping coffee while Dana leaned against the doorway with her arms crossed, a satisfied smirk on her face, while she said, "That was fun." It was never just about revenge, I said, though we both knew it played a role. Dana nodded. You rebuilt your legacy. On your terms. And you helped me take Titan from number 2 to undisputed number 1. She walked in and handed me a sealed envelope, which is why the board approved this. I opened it slowly, then stared. Chief Strategy Officer, Titan Freight, equity package, 12%, effective immediately. I looked up, stunned. Dana, you earned it, she said simply. And between you and me, I'm not planning on staying CEO forever. I need someone who understands both war and rebuilding. It hit me then. This wasn't just a promotion. It was a passing of the torch. Thank you, I said, truly meaning it. But before I could say more, my assistant knocked and poked her head in. Vanessa, you've got a call. Line 3. From Singapore. It's the Ryden Group. I blinked. The Ryden Group was a global logistics conglomerate. Massive, powerful, ruthless. I picked up the phone. Vanessa Hartley, speaking. A deep male voice responded, with a crisp British accent. Miss Hartley, this is Marcus Ryden. I've been following your work. What you accomplished with Titanwell. Let's just say it's inspired some conversations on our board. We're expanding into North America, and I'd very much like to meet, in person, preferably soon. I glanced at Dana, who raised an eyebrow. I'm listening, I said, leaning back in my chair. When are you free? The meeting was set for the following Friday, in Manhattan. The Ryden Group flew me in first class, booked a penthouse suite at the Whitmore, and assigned a private car to shuttle me around the city. Subtle gestures, but loaded with intent. They didn't just want to talk, they wanted to impress me. Marcus Ryden himself greeted me at the top floor of his corporate tower, tall, silver-haired, impeccably dressed, with a handshake that felt like a deal already signed. Miss Hartley, he said warmly, you've caused quite a stir across the pond. I've been called worse, I replied with a smile. He gestured for me to sit. The windows behind him offered a sweeping view of the city, but his attention never drifted. He was focused, precise, exactly the kind of opponent I would have once feared, exactly the kind of partner I might now consider. We've been planning a North American expansion for 5 years, he said, but we never found the right executive to lead it, someone who understands both the chaos and the chess game. Then your name came up. I tilted my head. Why me? He smiled. Because, in under a year, you dismantled a market leader, rebuilt a competitor, and turned a local war into a national victory. You didn't just survive corporate sabotage, you turned it into strategy. I said nothing. Let the silence speak for me. We're prepared to offer you the role of Global Strategy Director, he continued. You'd oversee our U.S. rollout, with full hiring authority, and an equity package that reflects your effectiveness. He slid a folder across the table. I opened it and paused. 0.4% equity, 8-figure base, autonomy across 5 international divisions. It was everything I'd once dreamed of, more, even. But strangely, it didn't fill me with instant excitement, just gravity. You don't have to answer now, Marcus said, watching me, but I'll need your decision within 10 days. That night, back at the Whitmore, I stood by the window of my suite, staring down at the glittering city, and I thought about Titan, about Dana, about the people who'd followed me, trusted me, built something real with me. I thought about the emails I still got from Colton's former employees, about Rachel, who'd found her voice again, about the clients who said working with me made them believe in ethics again, and I thought about one simple truth. I could keep climbing, or I could choose where I wanted to stand and who I wanted to stand with. I returned to Titan the following Monday, expecting a quiet re-entry before breaking the news to Dana. Instead, I walked into a war zone. 3 missed calls, 2 urgent emails marked high priority, and 1 message in all caps from our legal team. Call me immediately. I tease about Colton. I found Dana in the boardroom, standing over a projection screen filled with court documents. Her expression was somewhere between disbelief and disgust. What happened? I asked, stepping in. She didn't look up. Andrew filed a lawsuit. Claims we engaged in corporate sabotage, tortious interference, trade secrets theft. I blinked. Is he serious? Oh, he's serious, she said. Filed it in federal court Friday evening, right after your flight landed in New York. Almost like he knew. I clenched my jaw. It was pathetic, transparent, but also dangerous. Even baseless lawsuits could tie up resources, distract clients, and rattle investors. Andrew knew that. This wasn't about winning. It was about revenge. I sat down across from Dana. I'll testify. I'll go public. I'll bury him if that's what it takes. Dana paused. Then, for the first time in months, she looked worried. We don't need a fight, Vanessa. We need clarity. What do you want? What are you choosing? I didn't answer right away. Instead, I pulled out the folder Marcus Ryden had given me, slid it across the table. Dana opened it, scanned the numbers. Her eyebrows rose. Slowly. You're worth even more than I thought, she said. I'm not leaving, I said firmly. Her eyes snapped to mine. I considered it. I continued. It was tempting. But Titan isn't just a company to me. It's proof. Proof that I'm not a victim of Andrew Colton's decisions. Proof Proof that when you give a woman power, she doesn't burn the house down, she builds a better one. Dana smiled. That's going to make our legal team very happy. I nodded, because now, I'm ready to fight back. Not for vengeance, but for legacy. Just then, my phone buzzed again. It was a message from a number I hadn't saved, but still recognized. Andrew Colton. You think this is over? It's just getting started. I stared at it for a moment, then typed back, Vanessa Hartley, you're right. And this time, I have the home court advantage. The courtroom was packed. Reporters, former colleagues, rival executives, everyone wanted to witness the downfall of either a disgraced founder or the woman who had outmaneuvered him. Andrew looked polished on the outside, custom-tailored suit, rehearsed frown of concern, but beneath it, I saw the tremble in his fingers, the twitch in his jaw when the judge walked in. He'd bet everything on spectacle, that a public trial would shake me, that I'd settle quietly to avoid bad press. He still didn't understand who I was. Our legal team was a wall of calm. We had documentation, signed NDAs, proof of every transition and hire. Every Titan gain had been legal, strategic, and fully compliant. Andrew, on the other hand, had filed claims based on emotion, not evidence. Worse, during discovery, our lawyers found a smoking gun in internal memo from Andrew's former VP, Logan Sharp, detailing plans to isolate Vanessa Hartley from sensitive intel prior to her removal. It was retaliation, documented, signed, time-stamped. Game over. 3 days into the trial, Andrew's case collapsed. By the end of the week, not only was his lawsuit dismissed with prejudice, but the judge sanctioned his legal team for wasting the court's time. The ruling went viral. Judge slams startup founder in retaliation. Lawsuit calls it a personal vendetta, disguised as litigation. Andrew's remaining investors pulled out within 48 hours. His board voted unanimously to remove him from all leadership roles. The man who once told me I was too emotional to lead was now issuing an apology from his kitchen table in a YouTube video with 1,000 views and 7,000 dislikes. I didn't gloat, not publicly. Instead, I went home, poured myself a glass of red wine, and sat on my porch watching the sun dip below the skyline. Alone.com. Whole. A few weeks later, I got a letter, handwritten, from Rachel, the former financial analyst, who helped expose Andrew's financial tricks. Vanessa, you didn't just build a better company, you built a better path for all of us who thought we had to stay quiet to stay valuable. Thank you. Rachel, I kept that letter in my desk, not as a trophy, but as a reminder of what real leadership looks like. 6 months later, Titan expanded into 3 new countries. I was promoted again, this time to interim CEO, while Dana took a well-earned sabbatical, and I finally gave a TED Talk of my own. Rebuilding After Betrayal, How to Lead When They Leave You Behind. It hit 1 million views in under a week. At the end of the talk, someone in the audience asked me, what would you say to the version of yourself who accepted that demotion? I smiled into the mic. I'd tell her, get ready, you're not being buried, you're being planted. And oh, how I bloomed.